Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Index Office Hours. Today is the 29th of August and this is IOH 122. If anyone is new to Index Office Hours, and let's see, yep, we have some, I always say this, always new faces. GM Pablo. If you're new to Index Office Hours, this is the town square for graph ecosystem participants to come together to discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexers. We love participation. This is a conversation, so please do get involved via voice or text. If you're having any issues unmuting your mic, let me know in the chat and we can get that sorted for you. And with that, let's get into today's exciting agenda. So, as always, for opening remarks, I give a shout out to 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗂, and today is no different. We have 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗂 episode 131 from Marek, who is the CTO at 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂, and the president of 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂, and was also one of the founders of 𝗨𝘀𝗲, the layer one blockchain. So if you're interested to learn more about his background, how he got into crypto, how his work related to his PhD relates to his startup that he built and then eventually got acquired by GoDaddy, I would definitely recommend checking out that particular episode over here, which I'm going to link right there. So that's it in terms of opening remarks. Next, I will hand over to Anna, who's going to take us into our regularly scheduled Repo Watch section.
Thank you, Abel, and hello, everyone. Today in Repo Watch, we have a relatively light load of releases. So with that, I'll go straight in. On execution layer client, we have had a new Firehose Ethereum release, version 1.4.12. And this just brings reader node Firehose Protocol 2.3 support to all networks, not just Polygon. We have also had a new release of Avalanche. This is version 1.10.9, and a new release of 𝗨𝗀𝗲 version 1.8.0 beta 2. A new release of Arbitrum. This is 2.10 beta 12, and this improves batch poster reliability for L3s. And then on consensus layers, we have had a new Prism release, version 4.0.8, and this is a recommended release, and also a new Nimbus release, so version 23.8.0, which is a low urgency upgrade release that focuses mostly on performance and stability improvement. On the graph stack, we have had a new small release from Indexer Service and Agent. This is version 0.20.21, and this fixes adding missing fields when parsing network specifications from CLI options. And that is all we have had this week. And I see that Indexer Service and Agent version 0.20.22 is out and is running smoothly as well. Thank you, Jim, for that. All right. And if there are no more comments, handing over to Juan.
Thanks, Anna. Cool. So for Protocol Watch, we have a few things to cover. First of all, getting into firm governance for the timeline aggregation protocol. Yannis added the link to the full GIP in the thread in case you wanted to check it out. Then we go over to GIP 58, which is replacing bonding curves with indexing fees. There's been a lot of debate regarding whether indexing rewards are going to get replaced by indexing fees. And I think Zach made a small clarification that that's not the case. It's just that the way that indexing rewards are going to be distributed changes with all of the Horizon or Graph Protocol v2, or however you want to call it, changes. So there has been a lot of debate regarding whether, in order to kind of like go ahead with this GIP, we kind of like need to know a little bit more about Horizon as a whole in order to be able to fully grasp all of the changes as a whole, rather than just simply getting each of them separately or isolated. And there's a lot of debate there. So if you're interested in that particular part of the protocol, which is quite interesting, to be honest, I would recommend you to get into the thread and ask questions and help with the debate. That's always really appreciated. Next up, getting into forum research, there's a thread regarding ETH pool, a reward distribution protocol. Not entirely sure what this is about. It's basically a smart contract protocol challenge or something. I'm not entirely sure if this is some kind of like program that Graph had. I'm not entirely sure, or whether this is just posted in the wrong forum, but it's there. So if in case you want to check it out, there's a link to the thread in the agenda. For contracts, there are no new updates since last IOH. Again, last IOH, we had L2 transfer tools released. So most of the work, I think, it's making sure that everything's working smoothly. For the network subgraphs, we do have a small update to one of the network subgraphs, particularly the core network subgraph, which has a small hotfix to the L2 transfer tools update to fix the default delegation parameters on L2. This is due to a small edge case that only happened when transferring transferring your indexer, which would be initialized with delegation parameters as 0 instead of 100%. Again, this is something that also happened back in the day with the network launch. The workaround back in the day was to just set new delegation parameters and they would be changed accordingly. But in this case, it's due to another issue regarding the edge case due to transfer to L2. It has been fixed, and all of the hosted service versions running the latest release. Again, it's nothing major, but it's just a small fix that was required. For all of the other subgraphs, there are no new releases in last IOH. So with all that said, we are over with Protocol Watch, and I'm going to hand it over to 𝗟𝗶 now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Juan and Anna, for your sections. So I'm going to hand it over to Pablo, who's going to share a few words with us. So if you're ready, Pablo, fire away.
Hey, folks. Yeah, I don't have something very prepared. I think that the purpose of coming here today was mostly to understand like the feedback on L2 transfer tools now that they're out, and especially in relationship to increasing rewards in L2, because for those that have been following GIP 52, the original GIP said 1 week after launching transfer tools, or at least 1 week after launching transfer tools, we would ask the council to increase rewards to 25% on Arbitrum. There had been some pushback at the time from several indexers about maybe taking it a bit more slowly. So we had been thinking of something closer like 2 weeks. And the last thing we had discussed, I think at an IOH in the past, was let's do it 2 weeks after the next IOH, after launching transfer tools, and that would be today. So that was kind of the plan that we had in our minds. That is like aiming for 2 weeks from now, that I think is September 12th, as a date when we would try to get the rewards up to 25%, assuming nothing explodes in the next 2 weeks, and things still work, which, I mean, I really hope so. So yeah, I think my main ask would be if there's any concerns with this idea, if there is a strong push to do it faster, which might be tricky considering governance timelines, but we can try, or if generally folks are okay with that plan and going ahead with maybe September 12th. And we also have Tomas online here, and I think this kind of relates with what he's working on with exponential rebates, and I'll leave it to Tomas.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. I apologize if there's a bit of noise. I wasn't able to make it back home in time. So do let me know if it's too noisy, please. Yeah. The other thing we wanted to bring here to discuss and to get like your thoughts about is the exponential rebates upgrade has been ready for some time now. The only thing holding it back was that we, because of the way we did things with the contracts, we had to first finish deploying all the L2 transfer tools before we could go ahead and deploy this upgrade. So now that that's done, we are in a position to get the exponential rebates upgrade to mainnet. The idea initially was to wait 2 weeks after the transfer tools deployment, just to give us a bit of a breather, to give like all the internal teams a bit of room to address any feedback related to the transfer tools. The main question or the main thing that we want to align now is, as Paolo just mentioned, we are also increasing the index rewards too, and this would almost coincide with our estimated date of deployment for the exponential rebates upgrade. So we figured we could combine like both changes or to the protocol that greatly reduces like the amount of overhead that needs and the amount of like transactions that the council need to deal with. But it simplifies a great deal that part, and we feel like it's, for one, it's two very distinct parts of the protocol, so there shouldn't be any problems by doing this simultaneously. And the other thing to consider is that we are increasing the rewards now or in 2 weeks time, but there is an ongoing plan. So we will be increasing the rewards further a lot more times until we reach the 95% or 100% goal. So we not wait until that's done and pause everything else, right? So we will have to deal with this like simultaneous upgrades at some point. So yeah, the idea is probably to go ahead and in the week of the September 7th, start with the exponential rebates deployment plan. I will post more details on forum and on Discord as to what actions are required from the indexer side. Mainly, I think it's the indexer stack V2020 that's going to be required. But I will post all the details in the interest of time here. But yeah, I don't know if there are any concerns about us like kind of merging these two different upgrades, or any other comments that you would like to would like us to address here. We are here.
I think the obvious one would be not allowing one upgrade or the other upgrade to stall the execution of the other. That's the only thing I can think of. Where maybe you come across something in the last, before you make the upgrade, that means you need to delay it or something like that. I don't know if that's typical. It's been a while since I've been involved in the process.
That's a valid point. I think for both changes, like we are at a point where that's very, very unlikely to happen. Obviously, nothing is certain. We may find something, but like both, the exponential rebates has been tested and has been in testnet for some time now. So we don't expect anything weird to happen. And if it did, then the only thing that we would need to do is to create new transactions for the council to do one of the upgrades and not the other one, right? And that's perfectly fine. And then it's just a bit more work, but it shouldn't happen that one a problem with one of those two should like prevent both from going live. That shouldn't happen. Or I don't know, Pablo, if you can think. Okay, go ahead.
No, I agree. So the increase in rewards is just a configuration change and not really like an upgrade. So it's a lot simpler in that sense. And generally, once something makes it to the like, multi-sig transaction stage, I mean, so far we haven't had to cancel one of those. But yeah, if we had to, it's just replacing the transaction with a different one and gathering, like it's kind of falling back to trying to do things separately and getting council signatures.
Jim, can I get a comment? Or you want
go ahead, Antoine, go for it.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. First, I want to ask, is there any risks related to 7-day period with this arbitron thing, or you won't make it this week, this increase to 25%? Just want to mitigate this risk.
That's a good question.
With the 7-day period, in what sense?
Well, basically, for example, let's think about some fraud-proof game and finalizing, because the transfer tools were released last, Thursday, Friday, yes. And if you increase to 25% before Thursday, this Thursday or Friday, this might cause some issues.
It's a good point. In practice, the transfer tools, there's only one case where there's an L2 to L1 message, and that is when you're withdrawing from a vesting contract in L2 to the vesting contract in L1, and for that we don't even have the UI yet. We're working on that. That's only at the contract level right now. So I don't think there's anything from the transfer tools that would be in that dispute period at this time. Other than the general state of Arbitrum, but if that breaks, we have a lot bigger problems. So I don't think it will make a difference, but I think yeah, as Jim said, in practice it would be very hard for us to get it in less than 7 days. Yeah, like Derek says, it still has to go through council vote, through snapshots, and then the transaction. So I think like the original timeline, that is 2 weeks from now. So September 12th as a day when we do the increase, I think would be ideal. If you folks think we should do it faster, I can go to the council and see if we can get it done in less time. But I think like, if we're all in the, like, if we don't want to rush it and we want to do it like step by step, I think aiming for September 12th would be ideal. And then we would be over a dispute period since transfer tools for sure, if there's any concerns with that.
Yeah, I want to look at all this in a more wider scale. So we have permissionless and token 2049 in Singapore. So 2 big conferences. I think a lot of indexers will be present there. And I think a lot of indexers and both foundation, the Graph Foundation doesn't want to do anything during those conferences or any major changes right before those conferences. And if we will do it, when did you say September 12th? Yes?
That was the plan, if, yeah, unless there's a blocker, yeah.
And the permissionless starts when?
Where's that one?
Permissionless in Austin.
Oh, so it's in the middle of permissionless. I didn't know.
In the middle of permissionless. So I think it's
11 to 13.
Yeah, we should do it either before or after. To the second point, you try to combine both changes into one proposal. Yes, I see that it will make the foundation's life a bit easier, but it will make indexers' life a bit harder because we have to adapt to a lot of changes because we have our internal stacks. For example, we have internal reporting and so on. So we try to get everything in order according to this migration process, and if you make 2 updates simultaneously, it's just not doubles our work, but it have a bit more work. But in general, I'm okay with that. But yeah.
One thing I think I didn't mention maybe makes is a bit easier. Is the indexer version required for the exponential rebates upgrade is the same that's already required for the transfer tools. Maybe Paulo, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I think most, if not, I mean, if you've been following the L2 story, then you won't need to upgrade to a new version if you're already up to date. Yeah, 0.2020, the one.
Well, yeah, then in general, I'm okay with everything, but yeah, please keep in mind the big conferences, because I think a lot of people will be missed during those conferences.
Then probably, Paulo, what we can do is like push it to September 14th, which I don't know, maybe we can discuss offline, but that would be after the permissionless conference, and still it's 2 weeks-ish from now.
I think I mean that would work for me, and it fits the original timeline for exponential rebates that we had in mind. So I think like yeah, if everyone's fine with September 14th, then I think we can aim for that. And I know before conference is also okay, but I think I'm just a bit weary of the idea of like trying to accelerate the timeline too much, and then I don't know, it takes a bit longer to get council votes, or it's still like quite close to the launch that we just did with transfer tools. So thinking of giving a bit more time for everything to settle. September 14th, I think, would be an interesting target. But yeah, if there are any strong opinions otherwise, we can reconsider.
I have heard some concerns around, you know, where we're at with the sort of amount of stake that's migrated, by which I'm referring to the differing yield rates between, or mostly the differing yield rates between mainnet and layer 2 as being a concern. But it's not something that, no, this is not out of the blue or anything. We knew that there would be fluctuations and a dynamic between the two. And some would like to see the reward rate on Arbitrum bumped up as soon as possible. From my point of view, I'm more concerned that we make sure that if we decide on a date, so let's say, I think the 14th of September was mentioned there as potentially a target between the two conferences, then we find a way to sort of line things up where we have delays. Maybe the council is one of those places, such that we actually hit the target. So getting Cohen made a good suggestion the other day on whether we could sort of get the transactions that are required to do this pre-made, such that all we do is wait for herd cats at the council and then just hit the button.
Oh yeah,
that type of stuff. Just making sure that we're really trying to hit that number of the 14th of September. It makes everybody's lives easier for planning.
Yeah, that's a good point. And sorry I wasn't clear with that before. Like we would definitely do it ahead of time and try to get like when we did it for the L2 transfer tools release, what we did is we asked the council to sign up to 5 signatures, and then we have one council member that we're in touch with so that they can do that last signature at a specific time and execute.
Yeah, I wanted to say that
up really well there. Sorry, Cohen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think pushing the date quite further is not as not as smart potentially, because it has been mentioned that we are now, I think I just checked, we are now at like 4.4% of the network that is already on Arbitrum. Making allocations on Arbitrum is not as easy to get your allocation size in, so you often skew your ratios down, so you're actually earning less that way. So if we are gonna wait with increasing the rewards on Arbitrum, we are actually gonna my concern is that we are sort of grinding again back to almost halt the migration, because the financial incentive is not there. We are very close to that 5%, in reality we are at the 5% or over it, because the allocation amount that you need to try to get in is very difficult. So targeting half a month from now with potential delays, I don't think that's in the best interest of the network. Because we started the migration process, and I think if we delay it or if we put a timeline too far in the future, the math doesn't make sense anymore to sort of start migrating.
This is a good point. I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with the opposing concerns here. We could try to aim for September 10th, maybe, before permissionless. It's like a couple days earlier. Still not a huge difference because it's just 4 days, but it might help keep the momentum, and it still seems like something we could, like, in practice, get the council signatures in time. And then try to aim for exactly 2 weeks after that, do the increase, the next increase that will be to 50%. How does that sound in general?
We don't actually know if we'll come up against the same situation again, right? Because I know for a fact if the rewards were to bump to 25%, I can't remember what the intervals are, but let's just say they went, for argument's sake, they went to 25% in an hour, then I would be immediately going and, taking advantage of that. So the increase begets more stake. So we're going to keep coming up against this problem or challenge of, are we always behind ourselves? Are we always trying to catch up with ourselves when it comes to balancing the stake as the L2 rewards as the stake comes in from L1. So we either accept that there's going to be these periods of times where we're kind of quite suboptimal, or we find a way to be more efficient or agile in the way we increase the rewards. I think that's the only two things I can think of to solve this problem or challenge.
Yeah, I think it's very good points. I think there is going to be some delays. The idea of the timelines was not just in terms of like allocation efficiency or yield, but also to give time, ensure that things are still working well, and also to give time for subgraph developers or subgraph owners to also start making use of the tool. So after the 50% mark, the GIP actually specified a 2-month period to give like ample time for subgraph developers to start moving their subgraphs over. And in that case, I would say like we're definitely going to be in a state where like there's going to be like more or less 50% stake on L2, and we're going to stay there for a while. So I do think there's some point where we need to accept that there's going to be like some inefficiency in the process, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The how profitable indexers are, how good the return is for delegators, it's important. But when we look back at this in a year's time, it will be a blip on the overall timeline. A difference of a week or 2 weeks will not really mean anything. But we just do need to be cognizant of the fact that anybody can transfer that delegation anytime they want, and it could sort of nuke things to the point where nobody wants to move anything. One of the other concerns I had, and I don't know if this is really a concern, but apart from the, as delegators and indexers, we have an incentive to move across because it's cheaper, obviously, for us to do our business on chain, but we're also potentially in the short term, we might be able to increase our yield a little bit, both through the rates, the actual emission, and because indexers can be more agile. My concern is that subgraph developers, as far as I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the only incentive for them is that they can spend a lot less on their transaction fees to deploy their subgraphs. They don't participate in the yield, at least in that role as a subgraph developer. So what's pulling subgraph developers across at a rate that sort of helps us to put our stake to good use? Rather, at the moment we're kind of constricted by a certain number of subgraphs, maybe something like 100. How do we get more across? How do we get more subgraph developers across?
One of the things that I see very useful is meant that, as Derek mentions, higher indexer agility can lead to better uptime. That's true. One other thing is having no bonding curve, basically just flat bonding curve. That's also a great thing on Arbitrum, because you can't, like, you can just curate your own subgraph after a while without like thinking of getting rug pulled. Plus, if more indexes move there, there's just more reasons for you to move there because you want better support, right?
Yeah. So better resilience, better uptime as more indexers move over, and eventually a lot of indexers decide to completely disconnect from mainnet.
Wait, Derek, isn't the bonding curve just flat now? What do you mean transferring locks in your early bonding curve position?
Assuming that they were the first to signal on L1 and then moving it over to L2, they're essentially exiting on the earliest position of the bonding curve on L1 and then minting that on a flat bonding curve on L2. So it kind of locks in the potential profit that they could have realized if they were to remove
profit or
those
loss.
signals.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
And then, for it also mentions lower upgrade costs. That's true. Because you don't need to care about gas anymore.
Do we want to try and get some consensus on the dates here? I mean, are we saying that it's only really realistic to hit the 14th? Anything earlier than that is probably unlikely to be hit. Would that be fair, or do we think we can be a little bit earlier?
Can we just YOLO it tomorrow?
I think we could realistically make the 10th happen. I saw Gary commented here, and from the council we have Chris as well. I don't know, like, if the council members feel this works, but it seems like, for me, it sounds like there is kind of a general consensus that we could do this relatively fast. So it seems to me like aiming for the 10th would work.
Would that be acceptable also with Tomas's consideration of merging the other GIP?
Yes. The only caveat is that the original plan for exponential rebates had one week before the upgrade, we would be changing the channel dispute epochs parameter to 1 day, which is the time you need to wait after you close an allocation before you can claim rebates. So the idea was to do that, then wait 1 week and do the upgrade. But we could shorten that time. Like, there's no reason that should be 1 week.
So it may be worth clarifying that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tomas, but like, indexers shouldn't claim many vouchers on the day we're doing that upgrade. Is that the way?
The day before we do the upgrade. So the day before the second step, if you will. The first step being this parameter change. I don't know if that makes sense. That I think
epochs rather than days, so there'd be like a certain set of epochs where we say, please don't close any allocations in this period, or set your threshold such that you won't claim any when you're closing allocations for this number of
exactly.
epochs.
And that's actually the only action required from like the indexer side, if you are already up to date with the indexer stack, is to, like, the day or the epoch before the upgrade, the actual upgrade. So September 13th, if we go for September 14th, like, you shouldn't go and close any allocations on that last epoch before the upgrade.
Shouldn't or should?
You shouldn't, because if you do, you will be losing the rebates.
The rebates.
Because you will need to wait. Yeah. So the problem is, if you close the allocation like half a day before the upgrade, then you need to wait 1 day or 1 epoch to claim it, and by the time you are able to claim it, that method will no longer be available in the contract. So essentially, you will lose those funds. Yeah, this is all detailed, and I was planning on posting a reminder of all of these details on the forum and on the chat, just so everyone is aware of. But yeah, I think it's to your original question. I think it's no problem. Shouldn't be a problem as long as like we properly communicate these things.
Yeah, and as long as indexers are okay with like it's a shorter timeline to ensure that you're at a newer index version. Like if you upgraded in the last week or so, you should be fine. But it's just like making sure that everyone is upgraded, because it will break a bit stronger than it would have broken with the transfer tools thing. In that, like, there are a few code paths in the index version that don't like the claim function not being there, and also like ensuring that everyone's aware and they don't like claim any. Try to claim any at that point. If there's consensus for that, like we can make that happen on the 10th, I guess.
Any dissenting on the 10th, or is everyone in consensus with the 10th of September? Speak or forever hold your peace, or your typing, or whatever.
I think everyone is happy. Everyone should be happy about having more rewards on Arbitrum.
Exactly.
As fast as possible.
Okay, I will watch the chat for the rest of the call in case there's any concerns. But if consensus is formed, then I think we're good for that, and we can aim to do like both the configuration change and the exponential rebates upgrade on the 10th. Thank you all for this discussion, and thank you for spending so much time with us on this call on this.
Thank you for building the tools.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for building the tools. I know that you guys are at the coalface with us, and I know that this tool has been touched by literally everybody in the whole, in the core dev space, in other places. So thank you to you and to everybody who's made that happen, because it really is quite a slick, enjoyable process.
It's great to hear that. I will forward that to the team. Thank you.
Amazing. Great conversation, and completely agree with Derek's comment about IOH being a good sample ground for attentive indexers who are likely to move on to Arbitrum and then highly engaged in the protocol. So thanks guys for bringing this to IOH, and glad to see that there's consensus. So I'm going to hand it over to Stopper now, who's going to tell us a bit more about Playgrounds. If you hear Stopper, far away.
Yep, I'm here. All right. Cool. So for this little presentation, this might be a bit different than what you guys are used to in terms of indexer office hours, because Playground, as a business, we focus mostly on the querying side of the graph, right? We build tools on top of the graph. But I was hearing before the event started some people talking about how it would be nice to have some tools to dig into the numbers, figure out where all the query fees are going. So I think that will be very interesting for those of you who want to do some data analytics. And in general, the goal of this presentation is to kind of shed some light on an under-discussed but growing use case for the graph network, which is the data analytics use case. So without further ado, let's start this. So my name is Stoffer. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of Playgrounds. And at Playgrounds, our mission is pretty simple. We want to build data solutions and tools for blockchain analytics using subgraphs and the graph ecosystem as a whole. So specifically, the problem we're trying to solve here is a problem that many of us that wants to do analytics on blockchain data has run into, which is that, a lot of the data providers in the space are fragmented, right? You have so many options, so many different tools that all kind of format the data in different ways, right? You can even use something like 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗳, interact directly with the blockchain. But all of these have some drawbacks, right? Some of these are centralized, some of these only offer limited data. So it's really hard for your average data analyst to go from, having a question to gaining insight and answering that question. So our goal here at Playground is to go from this to this, right? Where our solution would enable data analysts to discover the data that they need, query that data, and then do their analysis to gain insight. And we're big believers in the graph network, and all our tooling is basically built on top of the graph. Because we think that the graph, as this ocean of modeled data, is ideal to solve that problem. So to achieve that goal, we basically have two different products. The first one is 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄, which is a Python GraphQL client library specifically designed to interact with the graph. Although you can also use it with any other GraphQL endpoint. It has some nice things when you use it with a graph that we'll get into in the demo. And so 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄 is open source. It is relatively a Python library, and Python as a language is relatively easy to pick up. It's modular, right? There are ways in which you can expand the library, add your own transformations, and basically extend the library as you want. And yeah, the reason why we settled on Python is because Python is easy to pick up. It's also the lingua franca of data analytics in the traditional computing world. Although SQL is big believers in Python. You can customize 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄s to your needs, as I mentioned. 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄s also automates a lot of the nitty-gritty in wrestling with the data coming from the graph, right? Because as you probably know, when you query a GraphQL endpoint, you get JSON data, which is not the easiest to work with if you want to do some analytics on it. And it integrates nicely with other Python data analytics libraries like Plotly, Pandas, and the whole ecosystem. So that's 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄s. The second product we've been working on, and we just released recently during the past month, is the Playgrounds API. And the pain point we tried to address here was a bit different than the pain point we tried to address with 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄s. And it has more to do with interacting with the decentralized network. So as you know, right now, there are two ways to interact with the graph network, or rather to purchase GRT to then interact with the graph network. The first one is kind of the traditional approach, right, where you buy GRT from some exchange somewhere, right? You transfer it to your wallet, you load the GRT into the billing contract, and then you can generate an API key and query the graph decentralized network. Recently, there was the addition of 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗃, which simplifies the process somewhat, but you still have to, have a wallet and touch the GRT, right? Which, although as crypto natives, this might seem very easy to do. If you're a data analyst coming from the traditional financial world, you might not even have a wallet, right? But you still want to be able to access that data. So this is where the Playgrounds API comes in. It's a simple SaaS, data API, basically, where users can create an account, pick a subscription plan. Usually the tier is what users start with. And you can then generate a Playgrounds API key to query the graph decentralized network, essentially. We're not hosting any subgraphs ourselves. All require systems, the graph decentralized network. And we manage the GRT for our users. So yeah, the Playgrounds API is a SaaS-like experience that many programmers outside of Web3 are used to. It's easy to manage API keys. It's also integrated with our previous tool, 𝗨𝗀𝗀𝗄s, which I will demo in a few minutes here. And there's some nice monitoring capabilities as well So, all right, let's get into a little subgrounds here. I'm going to unshare my screen and reshare it. My VS Code. Give me a second. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yep, we can indeed.
Let me know if the font is as I start typing. All right, so here we have a little Python project here where I've already installed the dependencies like subgrounds, and I'll show you how you can use subgrounds to get data into your Python environment and start crunching some numbers. So the first thing you want to do is you want to import subgrounds and initialize your subgrounds object here. This is kind of a singleton that we use to run all the query logic here. And say you want to query a subgraph from the hosted service, grab a URL here. It's as simple as first loading the subgraph. So to do so, you would use sg.load subgraph with the URL of the API endpoint. And then once you have the subgraph loaded, subground to query some data from it, right? So in this case, we're using the method for query data frame, and we're going to just query some swaps here, and we're going to get a nice data frame here where this is the first 100, and grounds will automatically grab all the fields for that entity type. Right? So we have a lot of data here. Obviously, subgrounds also works with decentralized subgraph. To do so, you can either paste the decentralized subgraph API URL here with your graph API key. It's going to work the same way. Or if you want to use the Playground API instead, you just need to go and generate an API key on the Playgrounds app, which I will drop in the chat. Like so. Then once you have your API key, you can initialize the subgrounds object, the Playgrounds API key like this. Try not to look at that key anyway. I'll delete it afterwards, so you'll have limited time to steal my queries. But yeah, once you do this, you can then, it will load the API key into the subgrounds object, and then you can use our proxy endpoint at api.playgrounds.network/one proxy subgraphs, and then paste the ID of the decentralized network, the decentralized subgraph you want to query. And let me just grab one real quick. So here we have the 𝗨𝗀𝗀 subgraph. So this, whoops. Check my notes. Oh, yeah, right. Subgraph /ID /the ID here. And just like for the hosted service subgraph, you can query it using query_df. I'm just going to put some entity here, let's say tokens. You're going to get all the tokens on the 𝗨𝗨𝗀 subgraph hosted on the decentralized network. So that's kind of like the basic use case of subgrounds here. I'm going to show you something that might be relevant for a few of you, which is how to query data from the graph scan subgraph. So I'm going to grab the deployment ID here. Deployments. Yeah, you can query by both subgraph ID and deployment ID. This is grab scan. And so you want to query data about indexers. This is how you do it. By default, as I mentioned before, subgrounds selects all the different fields of the entities. But oftentimes you might want something a little bit more specific. So something you can do here is create a var for it, and then reuse that variable here to query, say, the ID. Look at the different fields that are available. Say this state tokens. And maybe the here, the indexing rewards. That will give you a nice data frame with exactly the data that you want to use. You can also obviously filter the data, just like you would with a regular GraphQL query, right? So you can say where, look at my notes here. Maybe you want to filter out the indexers that have not gotten any query fees, right? So to do so, you can just grab that attribute here, and you can say only grab the indexers that have more query fees than 0, run the same query, and then you have a smaller data set all in a nice data frame. Likewise with any other GraphQL argument that you would usually use. So if you want to do first equal to some value here, or skip, anything that you can do in GraphQL, you can do in subgrounds here in native Python, which is the main point of. Last thing, I realize I'm running out of time here. I want to talk a little bit about how data analysts who use subgrounds, but also just the graph in general, create their queries. Because something we've noticed here at Playgrounds is that the type of queries you usually make for data analytics are quite different from the types of queries that you would usually make if you want to power a dashboard. So, probably the biggest change, the biggest difference is that as data analysts, we usually want to grab as much data as possible, right? So that means all the fields for a given entity. So that creates a lot of very big queries, right? We also want to query all of the entities of a given type, right? So for instance, if we want to query graph accounts, right? We might want to say like, hey, give me 10,000 of them. And to do so, subgrounds will automatically paginate the query. But the point of view of an indexer, right, that means you're going to get a lot of big queries very close to each other, right? Which may select a lot of fields. Here, I just selected the ID for each graph account. And the way pagination is being done here, I'll show an example of a query in a second. Actually, while this runs, this here, this is the typical data analytics query that someone using subgrounds would make, right? So you can see that there's a lot of arguments, right? Filtering based on a cursor on the ID, which is what we use to do pagination. Also filtering on block numbers, right? To get all the new data in a certain block range. Grabbing 1,000 entities per page, and then running that same query, up to 100 times to get as much data as possible, right? And selecting all the fields. So I know that there are ways in which indexers can adapt their systems to serve different types of queries better than others. And at Playground's here use case for these types of queries, where, as I said, you're grabbing lots of fields and also lots of data by paginating through all of the data. Here we can see that we've actually gotten only 4,000. That means there are fewer than 10,000 graph accounts on the subgraph. Yeah, I had more subgrounds to show, but I think we're almost out of time here. Abel, is that a hard stop at the hour, or?
We can go for a little bit longer, so feel free to keep going.
All right, cool. In that case, I'll kind of showcase like a little full, like a small complete example of some analytics you might want to do with subgrounds. And in this example, we'll be trying to figure out how profitable indexers are the graph network, specifically the Arbitrum deployment of the decentralized network. So the first thing we want to do is create our indexers here. And we want to look at specifically every field that has to do with indexer revenue, right? So indexer query fees, rewards. Well, it's mostly those two. So here I'm just going to shamelessly copy this from my notes. So we're grabbing how many fees the indexers are making, how many reward indexers making, as well as the amounts of tokens that the indexer has staked. So if we run this, oops. Oh, yeah, wrong field here. There we go. So we get a nice data frame here where we have all the indexers that are currently indexing on the Arbitrum decentralized network. We have how many query fees they have received cumulatively all time, as well as all the rewards they've received cumulatively, and the amount of tokens they have currently staked on the network. First thing you can notice here is that these numbers are not really human readable. They're the unit numbers of PRT, right? So if we want to make it a little bit prettier, we want to divide those values by 10 to the 18th, right? So Subgrounds has a nice feature to do so. It's called synthetic fields, and it basically allows you to create some transformation, or rather create a field that is the result of some transformation on other fields, and then being able to query that field as if it was a regular field that existed on the subgraph, right? So how we can do this, right? So we're accessing the indexer entity type. We're saying, okay, the adjusted amount of indexer query fees is going to be equal to the indexer query fees divided by 10 to the power of 18. And then we can replace the old field by the new field here in our query. And when we run the query df method, we're going to get much cleaner numbers here. So I'll repeat that for the other fields to make it more readable. This. Then. All right, so already we have a data frame that's a little bit cleaner. Now these values, tell us how much revenue the indexers are making and how many staked tokens they have currently, but it doesn't really tell us about the profitability of the indexer, right? So what we can also do with a synthetic field is create a called indexer return on stake, basically, right? So what's the essentially what's the percentage of revenue they're making compared to the amount of tokens they have staked? And so to do so, it's pretty straightforward maths here. We're just adding up the income and dividing it by the amount of staked tokens that they have. And then we can add that new synthetic field to our query. Now that will be part of our data frame here. We have a new column indexer ROS. Just for the sake of the presentation, we'll also sort the data frame here by indexer ROS and then ascending set to plus. So it's ordered by their return on stake. So we can see that there's one indexer here who's making 75 return on their stake, and then it drops off quite deeply. Obviously, this is a very basic analysis that doesn't really, it only looks at the current number of T staked by the indexer. So if the indexer has recently, unstaked a bunch of tokens, then the numbers will look a little bit off because these other values are all cumulative. And just for the sake of it, we'll plot out this distribution in a bar chart here. I'm just going to copy this. Here I'm using 𝗨𝘀𝗧𝗓, which is a one of the most popular plotting libraries in Python. Oops. Oh, yeah, indexers. Okay. So yeah, we can see that the distribution is probably what you would expect. It looks like a Pareto distribution here, except for that one outlier, which who knows what they're doing. Maybe they're the ones stealing all the query fees. So yeah, that is pretty much all I had for today. I hope that Derek's saying send me their address. So yeah, I hope that some of you have found this useful, whether that be from the tooling point of view, right? So if you guys if some of you are familiar with Python and want to do some analytics on graph data, then I highly suggest you check out Subgrounds. Even if it's just a hosted service subgraph, you can still use it. If you want to access a decentralized network subgraph, I'm assuming you all have Graph API keys, but by the off chance that you don't, you can use the Playgrounds API service to simplify the process of getting one. And in general, I hope that this has shed some light on the data analytics use case for the graph network, which we hope will grow as the network grows, because it is a vast amount of data that's stored on the graph, and it's mostly unused for analytics right now. Yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to me. Thanks, 𝗨𝗀𝗀, for hosting this. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to either join our Discord, which someone on my team will drop the link, or just ask them in the chat.
Indeed, yes. It looks like someone from the team has posted all the links there. People were asking questions as you were giving your presentation, but some of your team members here have been answering them, so that's good to hear. And as mentioned, if you have any additional questions, please do fire away in the Discord. Thank you so much for presenting, and thank you everyone for attending. I will take this opportunity to wrap the official IOH. But as always, folks are more than welcome to stick around and just chat and vibe. So if there are any questions or any follow-ups, Now is the time.